Hello, everyone. This is Kaila from Hidden Gems Literary Emporium. Today, we have Miss Susan Savion, the author of this book right here, Quoting Matilda, The Words and History of a Forgotten Suffratist, which is on display here at Hidden Gems Literary Emporium. Thank you, Miss Susan, for joining us.
Thank you.
And Susan right now is in New York, but you're from which state?
I was born and raised on a farm in southern Illinois near St. Louis.
Wow.
Lived in outside of Syracuse in Clark Summit for 5 years, and now for about 30 years I've been in Syracuse, New York.
Wow. So how'd you get from one state to the other?
Um, I married a man who was a professor of philosophy at St. Louis University, and he took a position as dean at the University of Scranton, and that moved us there. And then he became AVP at Lemoyne College. All of these are Jesuit schools in Syracuse.
Okay, just curious. So quoting Matilda, let's talk about your inspiration behind this book and why you decided, were led to creating this work of literary art.
It started with these.
Really?
I was a teacher for 42 years. I've been retired for a while, but I still substitute teach, still love to teach things. In fact, I just applied to do some classes at a place called Oasis. You're too young to know about it, probably. Started in St. Louis, but there's about 18 cities around the country. It's for people that are 55 years old or older, and all kinds of classes. So I've been teaching goddess classes and vacations that I've taken that have history and background about them, sometimes literary things. But when I was still teaching, and I was a reading specialist, I taught at all different ages, kindergarten through high school and on. But the last 14 years, I was at a middle school in inner city Syracuse. And I would start the day by writing on the chalkboard a quote and have them copy it down and discuss what it meant. A lot of times there's metaphors used in quotes, and they have, it's a little bit of a heart of a concept for them to understand the metaphor. So we talk about that and we learn about the person who said the quote. And usually they're famous people, but not all. And then one of the teachers said, well, why don't you just compile those and maybe get it published? And I did eventually. And they broke it down. I would teach thematically so that environmental chapter on that, women, Black history, different topics like that, or poetry. And the company that wanted to publish my book decided to break it up into 4 books, and they have these titles. So it's arranged differently: quotes that bring history to life, quotes to start the day, quotes to start the discussion. I don't know if I'm showing it right. And quotes to stretch your brain. And the concept in it is that there's the quote on top, and then activities to do connected with language arts there, and a bio of the author of the quote. And they only did 1 page of the women that I had, because in March, it's Women's History Month, right? And I would teach thematically that way. So I decided I should probably do another book just on women's quotes. And I talked to a friend, Dr. Roche Wagner, and she's the one that discovered Matilda. I had never heard of her. Most people still haven't, but she lived for 44 years in Fayetteville, New York, which is right outside of Syracuse. And Sally Roche Wagner was from, was it North Dakota or South Dakota? but she was at the time, the one of the first people to get a doctorate in women's studies. And she was at some kind of a workshop or something.
Mhm.
And a young lady came up to her and said, "Oh, my great aunt was a suffragist." And she said, "Well, I'm the expert in this field, and I've never heard of her." So anyway, she led her to the house, and there was a room full of letters and diaries and other kinds of things from Matilda. And she eventually came to Syracuse and saw the house where she lived, rented across the street for a while, decided to buy the house, and with the help of Gloria Steinem and lots of people in the vicinity donating for it, to turn it into an interactive museum. Interactive. You sit in the chairs. Where is it? No, it isn't. And I had it just around here. But Kathy Hochul is the new governor of New York. And she's from upstate New York. And she's visited the Gage House a few times. The first time I saw her there, she came in with this big, huge $20 bill with Harriet Tubman's face on it, because that was going to happen. But then, what happened. And she's visited other times. So the writing desk where Matilda would write, she wrote a lot of things, pamphlets and books and articles, and she even owned a newspaper for 3 years dedicated to women's stuff. And now for a year, Kathy Hochul has her desk in her quarters in Albany.
Wow, that's it. It's quite amazing the feeling that you get when you are around historic, really, artifacts of people who you read about, historic people, whether they're famous or whether they're just well known in the community where you live. But I can imagine, how you must have felt going into that museum and seeing her actual items and sitting in her actual chair and
sitting at the piano in the parlor, which is dedicated to the Wizard of Oz room. And there's the piano music. You can sit down and play Somewhere Over the Rainbow if you want. There's chalkboards to write on and all kinds of stuff like that. The house is divided into each section of her life. There's an Underground Railroad room with artifacts and things like that, but also a hidden bookcase that you can open and the kids can hide behind or something. That's not where the real one was, because it was a house on the Underground Railroad, one of two in Fayetteville. Actually, when she grew up in Cicero, her father, a rather famous doctor, and she was an only child, they had a house for the Underground Railroad also. So it was, the actual one in the house was in some kind of cellar, all that's all blocked up. But so they built this bookshelf to get the message across. And the next room you get into is the Haudenosaunee room. I don't know how many people are familiar with the Haudenosaunee, which means what they call themselves. It's the Iroquois, the Five Nations. And there's a rack of clothes from these different eras that people can dress up in if they want to, try them on, take pictures of it. My granddaughter, she's a senior this year. She's going to be off to college. But a few years ago, when she was a Girl Scout, there's Girl Scout troop spent a half day at the Gage House, giving little presentations and earning a badge for it. So they interact with the community that way. I already mentioned the parlor with the Wizard of Oz memorabilia all around, because most people don't know this, but Matilda Jocelyn Gage's daughter, her youngest daughter, married L. Frank Baum in the parlor. Yes, and they actually lived in that house for a while until he could find a better job. But there's this whole story about, well, let me back up a little bit. There's so much to say. Matilda and her father thought, well, she learned all this stuff from her father. She could go to medical school. Well, they wouldn't let women do that back then. So here's this next generation, and she and Dr. Samuel May, who I have some quotes of his in the book also. He was a Unitarian minister and also, like Matilda, very much into social justice type of things. They went to the president of Cornell University to convince them to admit women. And so her youngest daughter attended there for a little while. But by that time, her mother had already had this reputation, and she got kidded a lot, and she didn't fit in. And a roommate of hers introduced her to her cousin, who was L. Frank Baum, who was this itinerant actor with no steady job. And at first, Matilda had a fit about it, but it only lasted about 15 minutes. And then her daughter said, well, you always told me to think for myself, like her father told her. And she said, well, they started laughing and just, okay, And it turned out that actually Matilda Jocelyn Gage is sort of based on Glinda the Good Witch in the 14 Oz books, when the first one has Glinda the Good Witch in it, or good sorceress is what they called it. Things get changed with the movie. And so many of her ideas were incorporated in his writing. He didn't start writing the books until about 3 or 4 years after she died. But actually, the Baums lived in Chicago at the time, and she lived with them during the winters and died there. I should stop for now and let you get some questions in.
No, this is great information. And a lot of the things that you're saying are answering questions that are popping into my mind as you're speaking. I do have a question about the museum house. Why do you think, because it's very rare that you find a museum where you can touch things, let alone put things on and play with things and search through things. Do you know why they decided to have this format for this museum? Or if you don't know for a fact, why do you think?
Well, I think that Sally, and I don't know if Gloria Steinem was in on it too, but that this was to feel like part of it. The very first time I was there, I had never heard of her, of course, and I didn't know that L. Frank Baum had lived so close in the area also, until I went to the Fayetteville Library, and they had this whole display of Wizard of Oz. And every year they have this festival for 3 days with the follow the Golden Brick Road kind of thing and parades. So they, where was I with it? They wanted to be interactive. As I said, there's a chalkboard to write things on the wall and put your opinions down. There's tea parties in the parlor, and they just use the place for meetings. And I was a volunteer there. I still am, but not as much anymore, especially with COVID happening. But it's opening up again soon, I think. And there's a kitchen, and there's some extra things built on since then. And so it's used for a lot of things. There's, oh, I forgot this most important part. They have these girl ambassadors that key girls around the area that would like to participate in them. And they train them how to dialogue, how to present things. They were at the UN 2 years ago presenting some things. They've gone to trips to Ghana, the country of Ghana, because one of the other people that work there and works especially with them has connections there. And they become ambassadors to the community.
That's very important, because it's and when we were on the phone, we were talking about the youth and, you know, how books can influence them and things like that. But public speaking is not well, correct me if I'm wrong, but public speaking seems to be a skill that is not prioritized just amongst the youth anymore. You know, sometimes when the youth, they come in here, we say, you know, what are your interests? What are your hobbies? What do you like to do? And they're like, oh, I don't know. I don't know. And it's like, it's what they're doing at the museum with the youth is so important, because now they are raising children to grow up to be adults who are confident presenting themselves, their ideas, and even, you know, being around history. And it's just so important, because they say you don't know where you're going unless you know where you came from. So that's pretty cool. Let's talk about this book, Quoting Matilda. So on the phone, you told me that this book was something that was just placed on your heart to get out and do.
Yes, I felt pushed from the other side. Yeah.
Yes.
I wanted to get it done, and then it's consumed my life for the last number of years.
How did you come up with some of these topics, such as tactics, financing, morality, women's rights, slavery? How did you kind of come up with this format in the different sections of it?
Well, as I said, I was wanting to write another kind of book that was just with women. And I talked to Sally Roche Wagner, and she and I talked about it, and she sort of came up with some of that concept. And so I used the topics and added some others, and quotes, and then tried to build on that to connect it with Matilda's own life, history, and biography, and other things going on in her world at that time. So it includes some people like Reverend Sam May, and the king of the Underground Railroad, Jermaine Logan. He wasn't purposely pushed out of history, but it gets forgotten anyway, since it's been a while. Are you familiar with that man? He was called the king of the Underground Railroad. He was an escaped slave.
Yes, the only reason I know about him is because I read it in your book.
Oh, okay. There was we were visiting in Virginia Beach, I think it was, somewhere, Atlantic City, and there was a little museum there, and it really had a lot of things connected with Black history. But the curator was there, and he hadn't heard of him. So he was very excited about this, and I sent him some information about him.
Yeah. There's a lot of historical references in this book. I know in our copy, we underlined a lot of things, and we even tell readers, you know, when you're reading something and it has a capital letter, take the time to Google it, because you'll probably be surprised, even if it's a fictional book, that it has roots in some type of real history. So did you have to do a lot of research to put this together, or were the history components in this book things that you have already known?
Half and half. There's some things I knew from having volunteered at the Gage House. And what I would do when I was still full-time teaching, and I was a reading teacher, and it didn't have a specific what to teach, like math or social studies or something. So I could present other kinds of reading material, and often topics I wanted them to know about. I do this system where you give an article and black out every seventh word or something, and give them the words down below so that they can figure out what word to go in the sentence that would make sense. So and I bring other mentions about it too, and doing that with a lot with Native American things too. There's a friend of mine, I don't know if you've ever heard of Joanne Shenandoah. she's my favorite singer. She's Oneida Indian, and they've compared her to the Irish Enya, but she's much better. She's written lots of songs and CDs, and she's won a Grammy and a whole bunch of NAMMYs, which are the Native American Music Awards. And she's married to this guy who wrote a column every other week in the Post Standard in Syracuse. And I would cut out his articles too, to share his knowledge and information about it with the kids I was teaching at that time, 7th and 8th graders.
Wow. I know the name Shenandoah because in Lakewood, New Jersey, there's a lake called Shenandoah.
It's probably related to her great-great-grandfather somehow. That Shenandoah Valley has some kind of connection to it too.
That's interesting. I want to talk about you being an educator for literally a lifetime. Would you say that there is an age group that is quote unquote easier to teach than other ages?
I think 4th grade is sort of good for that. I've used 2nd grade also. There's been times when I've had almost impossible situations teaching in hallways, or when I was, a reading specialist, and it's just you with one-on-one or a small group of kids. I had a kindergarten class that just was wall to wall with kids, and they had their minds on, and it was an open school where no walls. And then I was changed to go to the middle school after that, and after that they put up some walls.
That's funny. Would you say that your book is for a specific age group?
I would like to see it in every middle school on up library.
Right.
As I mentioned to you, that New York State has added Matilda Joslyn Gage to the curriculum. I'm not sure when they started. I think maybe 4th grade. But I hope to maybe write a children's book soon also. There's so much that she has to share in her quotes and in her books. There's just so much to know about her and to appreciate. So that she was kicked to the curb is just really sad, that she was out of history for a long time. She personally didn't feel, I guess, that she needed fame, but it did hurt her when it kind of broke up with Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, because the three of them had worked together for over 40 years.
Wow.
And they wrote the first 3 volumes of the history of women's suffrage. If you look at the binder, it has Gage's name on it. But what I've discovered, there's a lot more people like Matilda, probably not as great, but still doing a lot of things. But unless you wrote your own autobiography or somebody wrote a biography about you, you get lost to history a lot.
Mm.
And so there's many more that could be written about, as I'm finding along the way.
Right.
And maybe this would be a time I could share this with you, because it's right here.
Please do.
This is a Smithsonian magazine from last November, I think it was.
Oh.
And there's an article, a lead article in it, written by Dr. Margaret Rossiter. She was a scientist and is emeritus at Cornell University. So she coined the phrase, the Matilda effect. Have you heard of the Matilda effect?
No.
It's becoming more prominent and more aware. But Matilda, along with other things, wrote like a long pamphlet. It wasn't a huge book, but Woman as Inventor. Actually, I have it over there on the shelf. But there were so many things that women invented or created, but they didn't get the credit for it. A man's name went on it. And this is still happening. I currently have a Facebook page called The Matilda Effect. I hope some people will want to go there. I have examples of people with the Matilda Effect, and it explains what that is. It's something from the Bible where there's something called the Matthew Effect, when those that have stuff get more, and the Matilda Effect sort of works the other way.
Oh, wow.
And there's pictures of Matilda and her house in here, and talks about how, and this is the house. It's in the book too, but
Yes, I
in
saw the
Fayetteville.
picture in the book.
Yeah, so it's become quite a thing. When you Google it, there's more and more information about the Matilda Effect and women that went through that, where they've been prime in creating, there was a class I was taking on Zoom yesterday about cosmology, and there was this woman who is the one who discovered and named pulsars, and she didn't get the credit for it for a long time. Eventually, sometimes they do get the credit, but that's the working title right now of a screenplay that I have, Matilda Effect, that I hope gets made either as a movie, or we're hoping maybe now the way her life has all these many segments to it, if it be a Netflix style streaming thing, perhaps. So cross your fingers for me for that, because I want the world to know about her. And I had never thought about doing that, but when someone suggested, well, making a movie, and said, well, yeah, that would be a wonderful way to get her known.
Right. And it would also, so writing books and making films are ways that we can ensure that generations and generations to come still have access to this knowledge and this history. And I mean, although of course we always pass things down orally, but it's when you have a book in your hand, you keep it just like you and myself, many people, we keep it on our shelves. We show it to our children. Sometimes they get passed down to our children, and it becomes an archive of sorts. So yes, I think that's a great idea. Question: do you have a favorite quote from Miss Matilda?
There's so many.
No.
I can't think of it right now because you asked me. That's something that happens with my brain lately. But it might come up with me later. There's ones about I won't even paraphrase it correctly right now, but that women can do things and don't need to depend on a man to do it, that they're equally human and deserve the equality.
Right. And asking someone their favorite quote is like asking their favorite book. And sometimes it's really hard. When we get customers, we ask them what their favorite book is, and it's always the same response, like, I can't choose. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I have a favorite author, Barbara Kingsolver, and I have someone else that quotes, and it's sort of my motto now, to be both and, instead of and or, both and. You can do both things.
Right. I love that. Meaning you don't have to choose between two things that you love to do.
Right.
You could do both.
You may have to take turns with them, but you can do both.
Right. I like that. Okay. So I'm looking at the table of contents, and I'm just going I'm just glancing through these categories. Would you say that there is one, maybe not one that is more important than the others, but one that is near and dear to your heart? Or do they all hold equal importance to you?
The Haudenosaunee, her connection with the Native Americans is near and dear to my heart, although all of those aspects are important. The religion ones, there's a lot of religious quotes because her magnum opus was Woman, Church, and State.
Oh.
And she wrote it in the last years of her life. And she was taking on the role of women in religious institutions.
Okay.
The Christian and Jewish and all of that. And she knew her history. She, as Elizabeth Cady Stanton says, she never knew anyone that could dig into files and libraries more than Matilda could and come up with stuff. And Matilda had gone for a while to an upstate private school where she was learning different languages. Actually, the very first speech she gave when she was about 15 years old was about astronomy. And if we ever get this movie made, if anybody's out there listening that wants to, get that going, the Matilda Effect movie, it ends in an interesting way at the end of the movie. I'm not going to give it away. So,
right, no spoilers. My next and maybe last question, maybe. I'm sure that you would love or would encourage people to email you perhaps and ask you questions about this book. Or you said that New York schools recently added Matilda to their curriculum. Perhaps maybe they should consider your book to be part of their curriculum or their syllabus. So what is the best way for people to contact you?
Well, I have a website. It's called Susan SavionStuff.com. That's a lot of S's.
Right.
And I'll be having the book available there, and also the other quotes books. And it's got some of my family and other kinds of things on the site also. It's getting reorganized and upgraded right now. So SusanSavionsStuff.com. I know that's long, but and I want to do a shout out to Supreme Media, who's negotiating for me about the book, and Book Trail, who's got me connected with you. I'm very grateful to that.
Yes, and we are going to go on SusanSavionsStuff.com because I'm quite interested in your other quote books. I think it's cool to have a quote within an activity, and I think our son Truth would really enjoy that. And it's also something that we can use in our youth programs.
Yeah, it's traditionally published for teacher resource materials. The way I would use it, as I said, I would teach thematically, and so I'd use quotes about women during Women's History Month, or poetry with April, and so on. And at the school that I was working at then, it was middle school, and we had what was called DINs, do it now. So you pick up this paper as you come in and start working on that sheet, and then you'll discuss it later while the teacher's taking roll. That's the concept anyway. It doesn't always work that way. But anyway, that's teaching through what we're connected with studying anyway. Mm-hmm. And I found that a lot of homeschooling teachers or parents like to use these books.
Right. Which is they're good.
You can make copies of them, they're that way, and are by each student their own book, if that's another way that they would want to do it.
Right. Which is probably also good now because a lot of parents have transitioned to homeschooling. in this time. So that would be a great resource for them too. And I'm in a lot of Facebook groups for homeschooling families and parents. So I'm going to share this link with them because I think that book's really cool. Yes. What's one thing that you would hope that readers take away from your book?
There's so much that Matilda was involved in ahead of her time. And even now, she might be considered further out there. Although, look what we're going through right now with women's issues. It's still a very current topical thing right now and very important. And to know the history of what some of these others went through, their lives, how they protested and made parades and speeches. Matilda Joslyn Gage was the one person that was with Susan B. Anthony all through her trial. Anthony did a protest voting thing and then was put on trial after a while and fined money, which he never did pay. But they were that close back then. And they took a lot of criticism, not just Matilda, but a lot of them that they'd get spit on, they'd get reviled, they'd stay at home and where you belong, or and there was a thing that happened, very bitty part for it that I don't go in too deeply in the book, but the National Women's Association, led by Susan B. Anthony and Stanton, and Matilda was president and secretary, had every high office in that group. But the American Women's Association were more conservative, and they were trying to, anti-alcohol. A lot of men were getting drunk a lot back then, and they combined against Matilda's wishes because one thing that was really important to her was separation of church and state. And that's in our Constitution. And it's a problem right now with some of the activities that are, going on that way. So she was kind of kicked to the curb at that time. They voted when she wasn't able to be there. She was home in Fayetteville because her husband was ill and taking care of him. And they didn't send her the money to come to the convention. And so it's kind of a tricky thing, but that's what happened. And the Susan B. Anthony thought, well, if they combine both groups, there'd be more people and we'd get the vote passed. And it didn't happen for another 42 years. So
no,
it didn't work.
Interesting. Miss Susan, I want to thank you for your time today, all the way from New York, not in Syracuse, but near Syracuse.
Well, I'm only about half a mile from the Syracuse University. So
wow.
I'm pretty much right next door.
Oh, okay. All right now. And so Quoting Matilda is on display here at Hidden Gems Library Emporium. You can come on by and get your copy. Or if you give us a call at 609-361-4331, you can schedule a virtual appointment and have this book shipped to your home. So Miss Susan, go ahead.
That it makes a really good gift book for people graduating from college or high school. I have one woman that keeps coming back to me for more books because she wants to gift them to her sisters, her nieces, her friends, and it makes a good kind of present that way also. Because it's a book that they're like snapshots. You don't read it all through. You read little bits at a time and consume them.
And people love quote books also. They also make for good coffee table books, quote books, because while you're, sitting, drinking some coffee or some tea, you open up, look at a quote, maybe get inspired to write a poem or something like that. So, thank you for your time today and for your work, for your research. Fun. Oh, yeah. I told you we would have fun.
One of these days I'm going to get there and visit your store
Please
and visit my
do.
niece who lives there.
Oh, that'd be great. And please tell your niece to come on by.
Okay, I think she works in East Brunswick. So,
Oh, wow. That's right over there.
mhm.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Miss Susan. And we look forward to speaking with you soon. Thank you.